Welcome back, guys. Today I bring you another app that you must understand in order to boost your React.js skills. Okay?
Okay.
And I'm talking about my to-do. So remember the project that we did here in this video? Pretty much we're going to follow the same idea. As you can see, we can add a new to-do. We can check on that to-do. We can delete that to-do. We can try to edit something, cancel that action. We can actually edit something. There you go. And here we have a special counter. Why is special? Because depending on the filter that we are currently in, is going to display the to-dos for us. You see? And furthermore, we have a toggle theme right here. So we can toggle over theme, of course, and our data persists across every re-render thanks to our local storage. Finally, we have a clear all items to clear up all of our to-dos list. So in a nutshell, we are going to see React Context and Reducer. We're going to see local storage and useMemo. So without further ado,
And this is be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because subscribing makes you feel good.
so guys, you go ahead and please install this extension. This will help us to type a little bit faster. Now inside of your terminal, we will type nps create react app. This will create a React environment for us, and that means that create the React environment inside of the full current directory. By the way, guys, the code is on my GitHub repository. I will leave the link in the description below. Go ahead, click code, and then download the zip file. Why? Because inside of our source directory, we have our image directory with the image that we are going to use. Next, we're going to delete all the files that we are not going to use and the unnecessary comments. Now we have our image directory with our image that we're going to use. Why? Because inside of our CSS, we will remove everything and copy that from our GitHub repository. So app CSS, going to copy and paste it inside of here. And as you can see, we have a root selector, CSS selector to define our variables. This group of variables is the general CSS property. Thus, regardless if we are on the light or dark theme, those CSS properties are going to run for both of them. Now, this little group here is for the light theme. For the names, I try to be as specific as possible, and I grab this little group and create a new class called dark, and of course change those values. For now, go ahead and say npm start to start a new server for us. And inside of our app.js, we need to create our main tag and then our few components: head, form, to-do, sect, and foot for footer. Of course, we need to create those components in a new directory called components, or just comp stands for components. And one by one, we will create those components. And now we need to auto import them. There you go. So we start with our head. We need to import an icon. I forgot to install those packages. So npm install react icons and nano-id. And restart the server, npm start. And for now, we have our header, our h1, our button with a class of btn round, and our icon.
A few moments later.
There you go. Now with the form, so we need to import our icon, and then inside of here we will say form, and then we deal with a class of input container that would contain our input, and then a button with a class of btn that contains our icon. By the way, this input comes with a placeholder and a required attribute. Now for our to-dos, we're going to import the icons that we are going to use here, because inside of our return, we will return another list with a class of to-dos, and then 3 hard-coded list items just to show you how they will look like with our CSS. Now let's go within our section and let's remove this. We don't need that anymore, and we're going to return a whole section with a paragraph tag with a class of counter, a span that contains the number, items list, deal with the class of filter box, then 3 buttons, all of that completed, and clear our items. Finally, our footer is going to be a stateless functional component because it's going only to return JSX. As you can see, we're using just parentheses and no curly braces because we are just returning JSX, and because that component doesn't have any kind of state logic there. So our next step is dealing with context. We will create a context directory and then ThemeProvider.js because we're going to deal with the theme context. In order to create a context, we need to say just create context from React, and I'm going to export this as ThemeContext. Remember that create context allows us to pass data through our app. You will see how in a second. For now, keep in mind that the powerful feature this possesses is that we avoid props drilling by using the context, of course. Then we'll say export the theme provider. We're going to pass the children, and then I'm going to return my ThemeContext.provider and going to wrap the children. Why that provider? Well, this is because create context returns an object with two properties, provider and consumer. But why that provider? Well, that provider component is used to wrap a part of a component tree where you want to make the context data available. In other words, the provider component is responsible for providing the context data to all the components nested within. Therefore, ThemeProvider here needs to wrap all of our components that are going to consume the data. But what data? Don't worry about it, we will create the data later. For now, we need to wrap something here. We can wrap our app.js here, but I'd rather to use it inside of index.js. So I will call ThemeProvider. Now let's go back inside our ThemeProvider and let's talk about useReducer. So as you can see, useReducer comes with returns an array with two properties, state and dispatch. State, you can name it whatever you want. In my case, it's going to be called isDark, and it comes with three parameters. First is the reducer. I will call it ThemeReducer, and this ThemeReducer you can create that in a separate file, but I will do it right here. And this takes a state and action as arguments, and then we're going to use the switch statement is going to evaluate action.type. And after that, we are just going to return the state. So, okay, ThemeReducer. Now, my second argument here is the value from which the initial state is calculated. If the third parameter is provider, the initializer function, this is the third parameter, that specifies how the initial state is calculated. If not, just the second argument, in this case going to be false, is going to be the initial value of my state, which is dark. Okay, now let's see how we can pass down the state by using the value prof here. So for now, this is an object, should be an object, and we're going to pass isDark for now. So in order to use that inside of our head.js, we need to call it. So const destructuring isDark from useContext. We're going to use useContext hook, and I'm going to call ThemeContext. Remember that create context comes with two objects, with two properties, provider and consume, but we are not going to use consume. That's the reason that we are using useContext to consume our data. For now, let's just console.log isDark. A hard refresh just in case. Let's inspect the page within the console, and we have our false value there. Now let's talk about what to do about that action about isDark. Since we're going to use LocalStorage to make our theme persist, I want to make sure that in our initial render we create that local storage. So for that we need to call useEffect. And depending of the value of isDark is going to be update that local storage. So I will say local storage that set item is going to be the theme. My god. isDark, but need to be converted as a string, so to a string. And so to make sure that our local storage has been created in our first render, let's go within application. Let me show you, and we have our theme local storage there. So after that, I will say if isDark is true, I would like to change the theme. So I will say document.query selector app, and going to add the class of dark that is coming from app CSS, and otherwise just going to remove it. Just remove. Okay, so now for our initializer function, we need to calculate that local storage. So we'll say const ls theme should be equals to local storage that get item, and I'm going to call theme. And we are going to use a ternary operator, so depending of the value of that, I'm going to convert my local storage to a boolean by using boolean, because that is a string. I need to convert that to a boolean, Otherwise, if my local storage doesn't exist, just return false. However, our dark theme comes as default because we are expecting the following, but that's not the case. The problem here is how JavaScript applies something that is called implicit conversion. So in order to fix that, first we need to set null here to make sure JavaScript applies implicit conversion, so null will be definitely interpreted as false. Then change this for an identity operator. This will only return true if the two values being compared are the same. Now, in order for us to see if this is working, we need to send now the dispatch, because this is going to evaluate the methods. So my first and unique case here is going to be toggle theme. It's going to return wherever the current value has my state and turn it back to false to true or true to false, and so on. And therefore inside of our head we need to call dispatch. So dispatch, and here we need to import a new icon, the moon. Now here we're going to apply a ternary operator depending on the value of is dark. And now we can trigger the action by calling on click, and here we're going to use dispatch, and you will pass an object with a property with whatever name you want to put it or create it. In this case it's going to be type, and I will call toggle theme. Why type? Because switch statement, so our theme reducer is evaluating action.type. So if action.type is equal to toggle theme, is going to toggle my theme. Therefore, we are able now to toggle our theme. If we refresh, our data should persist like theme. Now for the dark theme, our data should persist. There you go. Our next step is dealing with the TodoContext. So TodoProvider.js. Now pretty much we're going to follow the same ideas we did here. So right away, do not forget that we need to wrap our file, our app. In this case is going to be index, so TodoProvider, and we need to wrap our app. Now let's go back inside our TodoProvider and work with useReducer. Since TodoReducer eventually is going to become bigger, let's create another folder. So reducer, and of course our file TodoReducer, and inside of here we're going to apply the switch statement that takes or will evaluate action.type, and TodoReducer takes a state and action as parameters, and for now just return the state. Now we need to import that inside of our TodoProvider, so auto importer, there you go. Now we need to create our initial state. It's going to be an object, plain object, and this for now will have todos array that starts as an empty array. Then we need to pass that down our state. I'm going to call it todos and state.todos. Why? Because the state is initial state, which is an object, so state.todos, and that's what we got. And then dispatch. We need to use those todos, so we need to open our todos components. Now let me get rid of these two hard-coded ALIs by, and now we're going to use a ternary operator. We will say if todos.length is more than 0, and by the way, of course, we need to call those todos, so const todos destructuring from, remember, use context, the same logic as we did before, and then TodoContext. There you go, we have it. And after that we are able to apply our todos. So if todos length is more than 0, show something, otherwise show another thing. I forgot the question mark here. So this is ternary operator. This is my first component. It's going to be AlertMsg. Of course, that has not been created yet, don't worry about it, we will. And now here we're going to say todos.map, so each todo will return a TodoList component, which we will create in a second, in a moment, don't worry. We need to pass the key because we're mapping through, we're applying a loop, so todo.id, and then we're going to apply a spray operator todo. Why? Because this is a way that we can pass all the properties of the todo object as separated props to the TodoList component. Alright, so let's right away create those components. So this is an stateless functional component. As you can see, it comes with only parentheses. And now our to-do list. So pretty much it's going to follow the same structure as we did here. And remember, the props that we are sending through is, ID is check and text, and we need to return each li, and for now we're just going to display the text. And of course, since we're using those icons now, we need to import them right here inside of our to-do list. Imported. Now okay, let's remove this hard-coded li, and of course we need to auto import our components, TodoList and AlertMsg. You will see that AlertMsg gets displayed. Yeah, we need a hard refresh there, and there you go, we have our AlertMsg display because we don't have any to do yet. So right away, let's jump into our form component, and we need to call this patch from useContext and TodoContext. Then we need to apply useState for our input. I'm going to use the value prop. This is going to be the text, and this is going to be unchanged. This takes the event parameter, and we will say set text to be target.value to update the state. Then we need an submit event here, submit. This will be handle submit, and of course we need to create that method. So handle submit, this will take the event parameter. Why? Because we need to prevent the default behavior of our form. After that, we will create a new object. I will call it cons new to do. This will be an object ID property nano that's coming from the nano ID package. Then we're sending the text to be the text, but a shorter way to do that is by just saying text, because they both are the same. And finally, the property is checked. This is checked is going to start as false, and then I will say dispatch. And remember, whatever the name you want to put it, but since I want to keep consistency, we are looking for action.type instead of our reducer action.type. So we will say type. This is going to be add underscore to do, and the payload, you can name whatever you want to those properties. I'm going to name it payload, is going to be the new to do. After sending that, I want to clear my input. So now we need to go inside of our to do reducer and create that first case. So right here, value should be add underscore to do, and this is going to return. Remember that our state is an object, so first of all, state, we're using spray operator to get all of our current state from our TodoProvider, which is this part, and then we need to override the to-dos property. So we will say state that to-dos, so wherever the value has my array of that at that current moment, and then apply or add my action.payload, which is my new to-do for that. So let's try it. Hard refresh just in case, and we say hello world, and there you go. Now let's work with the check icon. So first of all, inside of our to-do list, we need to call or use the dispatch from useContext, and then TodoContext, and then here the button that is going to trigger the action is the check icon. So I will call on click check to do. We need to create that, so check to do, and we're going to use the dispatch, and here I'm going to say the type check to do, and my payload is going to be the ID. Now inside of the to do reducer, we need to create that case, so this should be check underscore to do, and then we will return the state in order for us to override the to-dos. So we'll say state.todos.map. So for each to-do, we're going to apply a conditional if the to-do.id is equal to the action.payload. We will return first of all an object to-do, because remember that to-do itself is an object, so we need to grab all of the properties from that object, and then again to override is check to be the opposite value of the to-do that is check. If not, just return the to-do object as it is. Now back here we need to apply some dynamic classes. So first of all, for the paragraph tag, depending on the value of each check, we will apply liCheck class. Now I want to hide the edit icon because it doesn't make any sense to edit some tags that has been already done. So ta-da! By the way, those classes are coming from right at the bottom of our app CSS, as you can see them. Next, we need to work with our delete action. So the trash can is going to trigger another on-click event. It's going to be delete to do, and pretty much we're going to follow the same ideas here. So we're going to paste, and this is delete to do, and instead of check, This should be delete to do, and yes, we are sending the same payload, which is the ID. Now, of course, we need to create that case, so we will say case and delete underscore to do colon. Again, we will return the state, and then we will say to do's that colon, then state that to do's that filter, and for each to do we're going to remove the to do that is being checked. So to do that ID should be different than action that payload, and that should do it. Let's see if I click on here, it worked. Now we need to work with our clear all items, so we need to go inside of our section. Again, we call the dispatch from useContext, and we're going to use the TodoContext, and the button that is going to trigger that action is of course clear items. So right here we say on click clear all, we need to create that function, so clear all, no params. We're going to use the dispatch, and for this just going to send the type of delete all underscore all. So inside of our useReducer we need to create that case now, so case delete underscore all, and then we will return again state, but our to-dos is going to be an empty array. So hard refresh just in case, and type whatever you want, and then clear all items, and they are gone. Now we need to work with the editing action. So inside of the TodoProvider we need 3 new pieces of state. So edit flag is going to be false, then edit ID is
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
then text to edit is going to be as well as empty string, and of course we need to send them down via the value prop. After that, inside of our to-do list, the button that is going to trigger that action is this one. So on click the edit icon, so on click edit function, we need to create that function, that method edit fx. This is going to take the dispatch, and the start argument is going to be, the type is going to be edit underscore config, and then the payload they're going to send is going to be a new object. This is going to be the text and the ID. Then inside of our reducer we need to create that case, so case edit underscore config. We're going to return again the state, and first edit flag should be the opposite value of my state flag value, so we can toggle it. Then the text to edit is going to be action payload that text, and finally edit ID should be action that payload that ID. Now we need to go back inside of our form, and the first action that I need when I click on the edit icon is to show my text inside of my input. Therefore I need to cause a re-render, and for that we're going to use the useEffect hook. But remember, from our TodoProvider we need to destructor edit flag, and now text to edit. We're going to work with this first, because depending if this changes is going to update the text value which is inside of my input. Who is controlling that text value? Well, the value prop. So in order to update the state of that, we're going to call set text, and we're going to pass text to edit. So for instance, if I go here, click edit, hard refresh just in case, again edit, and there you go, we have our text right there. Furthermore, I want to toggle, depending of the value of the dict flag, some icons. Before I do that, I need to import a few more icons. So down here we're going to apply a ternary operator inside of our submit button, and depending of the value of the edit flag, so if edit flag is false, we're going to show a plus circle, if not, an arrow, as you can see. Furthermore, we have another button, another statement here, just down here. We're going to use curly braces, and we'll say if edit flag is true, return the button with my cancel action here, or my cancel button. Now let's go inside of our to-do list, and here we need to destructor or extract edit flag, because depending of that, the other thing that I want to do is to hide these icons. So when we are actually clicking on the edit icon, we are hiding those icons. So in order to do that, we're going to apply a few dynamic classes. So the first one is going to be the check, as you can see is hide. Now the other icon that I want to hide is the trash can. So right here we're going to apply dynamic class depending on the value of the edit flag. Now for the edit icon itself, we're going to say parentheses here, or operator or conditional, and then of course we're going to call edit flag. A hard refresh again, and let's test it out, and they are gone. Then we need to do something with this cancel button. So going back inside of our form. So this button is going to trigger that action, the block icon. So unclick, back to default. I will create that function back to default, and I'm going to send dispatch. Dispatch in this case is going to be the type of reboot. Of course, inside of our reducer we need to create that case. So right here we'll say case reboot, and we're going to return the state and the initial values from my state, which in this case are all of them. So just going to grab them and paste them. So again, let's test it out. Hard refresh first of all, and now let's test it out. Edit icon, cancel, edit, and cancel. However, if we try to edit something new, let's see what happens. It created a new to-do for us. But why is that? Well, the answer is evident. We are reusing handle submit here. So we need to change that by using the edit flag. So we will say if our edit flag is false, please create a new to-do. Otherwise, we're going to edit that to-do and not create a new one. So we need to call dispatch, and this is going to be the type of edit underscore to-do, and the payload is going to be, this case, the text, wherever the current value is from my text, which is inside of my input. Okay, and once we are done, I would like to restart everything from scratch, so like reboot. So in order to do that, we're going to reuse back to default method here, since we are already calling dispatch and reboot here there. Now inside of our reducer, right here we need to say case edit underscore to do. We're going to return again the state, and then we're going to override the to-dos. So state.todo.map. So for each to-do, we're going to apply first of all a conditional. So if my to-do.id is equal, and now it's time to call our
Mouse get tools, mouse get tools.
We're going to return again the to-do, because that's an object itself, all the properties, and then we're going to override the text property action.payload with action.payload. After that, I believe that should do it. Let's hard refresh again and test it out with that. There you have. However, I forgot to add to return the to-do itself if my condition is not met. Now let's talk about local storage. One of the features that I love the most about useReducer is that it allows me to use local storage simply and easily. Now since we want our data to persist across every re-render, it's natural for us to call useEffect, because by calling useEffect we are making sure, first of all, to create our local storage. Going to call it to-dos and going to say JSON.stringify and then the state.todos. Remember, key value pairs, we need to send a string type, and every time my now state that todos changes, I will override, therefore update my local storage. So by using useEffect with our first render, I'm making sure that we are actually creating our local storage. After that, we need to use the third parameter, which is the initializer function, because we need to call our local storage by using getItem method and calling our todos. Then I will return an object. Why an object? Because initial state, remember, is a whole object. Therefore, we need to say ... and then initial state, comma, and then we're going to override the todos properties by using a ternary operator. So const to do, if that is true, I will say json.parse that local storage, otherwise just return whatever is inside of my todos. So initial state.todos, which is an empty array. By this point, that should do it. So a hard refresh just in case, and let's test it out. Item 1, item 2, item 3. We can toggle everything, we can refresh, we can still have it, we can delete one, we can refresh again, and we still haven't. Lastly, we need to deal with our counter and with our filter buttons. So I already created my MemoProvider inside of my context directory. By the way, guys, I had a problem with the automatic imports here. It was imported like that, and I don't want that. I want to use the import and from syntax, just to let you know that. Okay, in order to create a context for our MemoProvider, we need to say export const as a MemoConst equal to create context. Then we will create the MemoProvider as we did it before. We're going to pass the children as props, and we will be going to wrap them inside of our MemoContext.provider. Now inside of index.js, we need to import it, or actually wrap our app inside of MemoProvider. Now let's go back, and we are not going to use Reducer because our MemoContext relies on or depends on the TodoContext. Why? Because depending on the to-dos, how much to-dos do we have is going to calculate that. It's going to filter that to-dos. So that's the reason that we're using useContext of to-do from TodoContext. Next, I will create a new state that we're going to call filter type. Alright, and finally, let's talk about useMemo. useMemo lets you cache the result of calculation between re-renders. And as you can see, useMemo has the similar structure as useEffect. Why? Because it comes with a function. This function calculates the value that we want to cache, and also comes with an array dependency. This dependency dictates if our function here should run again or not. So useMemo is going to return any memoized value. So in this case, I'm going to call it, because I'm going to store it, filter todos should be equals to that useMemo. And for my array dependency, is going to depend on our to-dos, and it's going to depend on the filter type. Now here in this function that we are going to calculate, we need to apply if statement. If filter type is equally to completed, we need to return to-dos that filter. So for each to-do, we're just going to return to-do that is checked. So we need to return all the to-do that has been checked, of course. Now else if filter type is equally to undone, pretty much we're going to follow the same idea. But instead of to-do check, we're going to return every single to-do that has the check is checked as false value. Otherwise, we just return the to-dos. That's it. That's my calculation. Now, in order to get my items count here, we're going to apply the same logic. So we'll say const item count should be equals to useMemo again, and I'm going to calculate depending of my filter to-dos. So in order to get how many filter to-dos do we have, we're going to use filter to-dos that length. And of course, we need to send them inside of our provider. So we're going to use the value prop, an object. We are sending filter type, filter to-dos, and finally item count. Furthermore, we need a way to update the state of filter type. Therefore, we need to use set filter type. I already have it here. So the first method they're going to set is show all to-dos, and this is going to update the state to all. So set filter type all. Now the other method is going to be show only completed, and this is going to update the state to completed. Finally, show only undone, and this is going to update the state to be undone. Therefore, if our state has been updated, that means that it's going to trigger filter to-dos. So this method means that needs to be attached to these buttons, to all of these buttons. Therefore, we need to go inside of our sec component, and we need to import them right away. So we need to import MemoContext, of course, and the first thing that we're going to use is item count. So inside of my span, we are going to call item count. For now, we have 2 items. Now we need to use our onClick event. So for our first button, which is this one right here, we're going to trigger onClick, show all to-dos. Now for our undone buttons, we are going to send onClick, show only undone. And finally, for the last button, we're going to attach an onClick event and call show only completed. Furthermore, depending on the value of filter type, we're going to apply dynamic classes here. So if this has if filter type is equal to all, we're going to apply the active class. So the same idea is going to run for the rest of our buttons. So we have the undone, and finally if filter type is equal to completed, we're going to send the class of active there. Next, we need to go inside of our Todos in order to see that that works. I mean, from here, instead of const Todos and Todos, we're not going to use that, we're going to use the MemoContext. So we will say use context and then MemoContext. Why? Because from here we need to extract filter Todos, the calculation, because we are filtering all of our Todos. So filter Todos. So now instead of Todos here, we say filter Todos to show our filter Todos. So a hard refresh just in case. And now let's try it. If we click on undone, we have the undone item, and completed, we have the completed item. As you can see, our count is getting updated every time we click one of those buttons. Lastly, let's clear all of our items. So as you can see, if I clear all of them, I would like to hide all of our buttons here. Therefore, if we go back inside of our section here, so from this dispatch, from this context, from TodoContext, I need to get my Todos and then my edit flag. Why? Because we're going to apply a ternary operator here with a conditional. So next, just beneath the operator tag, we're going to say curly braces, and we're going to say if todo length is more than 0, that means that we have data, and if edit flag is false, therefore return the following, which are all of my buttons. So I'm going to grab those, all of them, and put it inside of here. By the way, this is React fragment that allows me not to create another unnecessary node. Finally, just in case, right here in clear all, I would like to call dispatch and reboot as well. And that should do it. So let's test it out. So initially, with no data, item 1, item 2, item 3, we should refresh. We are persisting our data. So we click here, we delete that, we refresh again, we add some more items, and we click and complete it. We have our completed to do and undone, and just the undone to do. If I click on clear of items, they are gone.